Hey guys, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Keely Ogden, I'm a writer, and I am the Vampire Girl. Today, we are talking about a book that's been on my reading list for a while, but I just never gotten around to it until now. We are continuing our Pride celebration here on the Vampire Girl with the first gay vampire book of all time, and that is Carmilla. Let's jump into it! Carmilla was originally released in 1871 and is written by Irish author Joseph Sheridan Le Fanu. I don't know how to pronounce his last name, so I'm just gonna call him Joe for the video. I'm American and I don't know how to speak words. Carmilla was originally published in a magazine and then was later released in a short story collection called In the Glass Darkly. Joe, for his part, was known as one of the best mystery and ghost story writers of his time period. Carmilla has become one of his best known works and has had dozens of adaptations. Oh wow. I'm blaming the heat stroke. Carmilla herself has appeared as a character in many different books, movies, and TV shows, aside from just adaptations of her story. Next to Dracula, she's probably the most adapted vampire character in history, and I'd argue that she kind of rivals Dracula, although her films and her appearances are a lot less recognized. This book is going to be a little hard to review just because it is so short. It's actually a novella instead of a full-length novel. That said, I will do my best to give this story the credit that it deserves because, honestly, it's a classic for a reason. If you are unaware of how my videos are set up, here's how it's going to go down. I will give you a brief spoiler-free summary of the book, as well as a smattering of my thoughts, a rating out of 5. I'm going to say whether or not I will continue to follow the author and its work. Then I'll give a more in-depth analysis of the book. Not going beat by beat like I do with my movie reviews, but touching on some of the themes, some of my favorite lines, and talking a lot about the characters. Because y'all know, characters are my favorite thing in these stories. Alrighty, let us jump into Carmilla. The story takes place in Styria, which is a state in southern Austria. The story follows Laura, a young noblewoman who lives in the countryside with her father. One day, a stranger literally crashes onto their property, and they take them in and begin to care for this poor, frail young woman. Unfortunately, it seems the laws of hospitality extend to becoming a feast for your wounded house guest. Laura becomes fascinated with this beautiful stranger. And then vampires. That's where I'm going to leave the spoiler-free section, so if you want to know more about the plot, stick around to the end of the video, or just go check out Carmilla. There are free ebooks of it all over the place. It's in many horror short story collections. I just bought this copy because it's pretty, and I'm kind of salty that you can't really see it, because it's really pretty, and I liked it. So, I also have it in a short story collection of short vampire stories, because I am an addict, and vampires are my drug, and I won't apologize for it. Honestly, I wasn't sure what to expect with Carmilla. I mean, classic literature is kind of a hit and miss with whether it's going to connect with readers nowadays. I also wasn't sure how a female protagonist was going to fit in to this time period, especially when it was written by a man. Honestly, Laura's a pretty good protagonist. She has a very distinctive voice. She's not weak or whiny. Okay, in the beginning she is a little bit, but she grows out of it. Laura has personality, and she's strong. The one thing is, I wish that the book was longer. There were several unanswered questions, but doing some research into Joe, that was kind of his style. He liked leaving little mysterious ties and letting the reader just kind of piece together what they want to piece together. So I get it. I just wanted more. I wanted more. Also, the ending was a little lackluster. I wish there had been more in terms of the ending. It was fine. Like, it was fine. It was a fine ending for a short story, but I just wish there was more. Everything said, Carmilla gets a score of 4 out of 5 from me. I highly recommend you guys go check it out. If you have an hour or two, sit down, slam it out. It's a fun time. As for me, I really want to take a further look at Joe's work. I want to get my hands on a copy of In the Glass Darkly. I'm looking for it. It's probably on Amazon. I need it. Alright, spoiler-free people. Get out of my video. Go read the book or watch some of the adaptations. I haven't checked any of them out yet. It is on my to-do list. So, there's a lot. But definitely check out Carmilla. You can get several different copies of it on Amazon. This is the one that I got. It's large text, which I didn't realize when I bought it. So double check. If you like reading the large text, that's fine. That's why it looks as thick as it does. It's not that thick. It was like, I also have it in a short story collection, like I said. It was like 60 pages. It wasn't that long, but definitely worth checking out. Go read it. All right, we're diving into spoilers. We're about to get saucy and gay. Very gay. This book is very gay. One reason that Laura works so well as a protagonist in this story is because she lives a very sheltered, very privileged life. She is the only daughter of a nobleman, and she has his full attention all the time. She is babied, she has these very loyal servants and nursemaids that take care of her when she's a child and, you know, take care of her as she's growing up. There's not a lot of people that live in the area that they're... Is it an estate or is it a castle? I can't remember how they refer. I'll call it a castle. I'll call it an estate. There aren't many people who live around their estate. They talk about how there used to be a village nearby that laid in the shadow of this huge castle, but both the castle and the village have been abandoned for years and years and years. So Laura doesn't really have a lot of people her age to interact with. The only people she really has is her father and her servants. There is a family friend that lives several leagues away, known as the General. I may try to pronounce his name at some point, but no guarantees because it's an Austrian name, and I am an American who can't read. This general is taking care of his young niece, who has been promised to meet Laura at some point and become friends with her. And so this has Laura like super hyped because she doesn't have friends. And this is another reason that she is such a easy target for the vampire of the story. Laura is also a perfect analog for the conservative religious kid who grows up in a small sheltered community and grows up and then is shocked by what she sees at the outside. That's basically what Laura's transformation is through the book. The appearance of this stranger catapults Laura from her sheltered, simple life into being forced to kind of see what the world is at large. In this way, Laura's father's desire to keep her sheltered from the pain and the risk of the world ultimately almost leads to her destruction because she is unaware of the risk and she does not know how to recognize the risk that comes from the outside world. So basically, protecting your kid is fine. Sheltering them completely leaves them vulnerable to vampires. The conflict of the story is kind of kicked off when General Spielsdorf? The General sends a letter to Laura's father because he and his niece are supposed to come and visit Laura's estate here pretty soon. But he sends them a letter and is like, she's dead. My niece is dead. And it's kind of this rambling letter of regret and how he should have known better than to invite a strange person that they didn't know into their house, and how he feels guilty and responsible for his niece's death, and how he warns Father and Laura. I don't think Father ever has a name. Does he ever get a name? I don't think he does. He warns Father and Laura to just be wary. He'll be there when he can, but right now he's trying to hunt down this creature that took his niece away from him. I like this as a setup because after this initial reading, the letter is almost forgotten about until the end of the story. We do get little reminders here and there, especially when a stranger shows up at the estate, literally crash lands into their lives. It's kind of funny. For the most part, the General is not mentioned again until he appears towards the end of the story. As readers, we're just left with his warning in mind. And going and knowing that this is a vampire story, or like a spooky tale, we're like, oh no, the little wheels are turning in our minds. And we're like, the letter. Remember what the General said about spooky strangers. After they get the General's letter, they are going for a walk and this carriage starts like galumphing down the path outside their castle, or like the road that runs in front of the castle, and everybody's outside just like admiring the night because it's Styria and it's mountainous and foresty and beautiful. And this carriage like tries to take a turn too sharp, or the horses are spooked by something and just like freak out, and the carriage literally crashes onto their property. And these two women get out. It's an older woman and a woman about Laura's age. I think Laura, I think they say she's about 17, I think. So the older woman gets out, and of course, Laura, father, and the two main maids run over to like check him out and be like, oh my gosh, is everybody okay? And the older woman helps the younger woman out of the crashed carriage and like lays her on the side of the road, and like a Disney princess. So the mother asks father if Carmilla, her daughter, can stay at the castle because she has some very important business to attend to, and she has to get there so fast. But Carmilla is sick and she just can't travel so far and so long and so hard, because we're not going to be able to stop the carriage for a few days because we just have to get where I'm going. So please, big strong man, will you take care of my sick daughter? And father says, yeah, okay, that sounds legit. Men are stupid. So Carmilla moves in, and there was a very funny detail of her chamber that they move her into. So Carmilla, if you didn't know, is the vampire of Carmilla. They move her into this chamber in the estate, and there is a big painting across from the bed of Cleopatra, and it's a scene of when Cleopatra takes her own life. So she's holding the snakes, and she's holding them to her chest, and that's the painting that is in Carmilla's room. And if that is not one of my favorite pieces of foreshadowing in literary history, bravo, Joe. I really liked it. As the story progresses, Laura talks a lot about how she feels very conflicting emotions for Carmilla, because Carmilla, for her sake, is very beautiful. She's pretty soft-spoken. Her movements are described as very languid, so she just seems very unbothered and very just like graceful and fluid and kind of like, you know? But there are moments where Carmilla will lash out and where she will be a little more aggressive, especially in the way that she speaks to Laura. So like if Laura is asking too many questions, Carmilla will just be like, hey, stop it! No! And that's that turn. And then there are moments where Laura is talking about religion, or religion is brought up, or there's religious iconography, or there's like a funeral procession going on and there are religious hymns being sung, and Carmilla is just like, well, and Laura's like, dude, chill. It's chill. So there are moments like this where Carmilla snaps and she like gets upset and angry, and then she almost immediately goes back to that soft, feminine, languid state of being. So Laura is confused not only by Carmilla's mood swings, but by this sense of attraction that she feels towards Carmilla, and that Carmilla clearly feels toward Laura. Carmilla is not subtle. She's like, hey, Laura. And Laura's like, yeah? Okay. Laura also describes Carmilla as gentle and yet confident. So it's partially this confidence that attracts Laura to Carmilla. Here's how Laura described her feelings towards Carmilla. Now, the truth is, I felt rather unaccountably towards the beautiful stranger. I did feel, as she said, drawn towards her, but there was also something of repulsion. In this ambiguous feeling, however, the sense of attraction immensely prevailed. She interested and won me. She was so beautiful and so indescribably engaging. When she's talking to Carmilla, Laura also brings up that young people like and even love on impulse. So her attraction towards Carmilla, she plays off as very natural. And honestly, something that surprised me was that throughout the entire book, nobody seems to care that Carmilla and the girls that she preys upon, like Laura, like the general's niece, that there's a very clear attraction between them, and nobody ever says anything about it. It's like, yeah, okay. You think she's pretty, she thinks you pretty. Okay. And that casualness really surprised me, because it's 1872. It was like people were being jailed for being gay. And Joe just wrote like, yeah, they like each other in that way. And he's not subtle about it. I was so surprised how not. I had heard that Carmilla was a book with lesbian subtext and lesbian undertones. There is no subtext. There is no subtext. Laura and Carmilla want to do the deed. They fall in love? Question mark? There's just that mutual infatuation and attraction to each other. Would I call it love? Possibly. I'll get into that a little more later. Continuing. Having a female protagonist and a female antagonist also created a lot of really fun dynamics that I did not expect to see in a book this old. Carmilla and her mother use the general's and father's sense of chivalry to gain access to their homes. They come up to these noble men of great compassion and say, hey, I am woman. I need help. Help, woman? And the man is like, of course, help, woman. I am noble and chivalrous. I will help, woman. And Carmilla and her mother are like, yeah, you will. Help me kill your daughter. So we see in this case that the men's sense of duty is being taken advantage of. There are also several instances through the book where we see how perceptive Laura is. She notices things that, for example, her father does not. When her father is first talking to Carmilla's mother, she notices that the woman's body language is very odd. She notices very subtle changes in the way the woman is holding herself, how close she is leaning to her father, how her facial expressions change. All of these subtle things that father does not pick up on. And I thought that was great because as women, we can typically read other women's body language and pick up on things that men can't pick up on. I mean, that's how we know how to go and pretend to be our friend's girlfriend to get her away from a creepy guy. We know each other. We can tell. So it's so cool that that was included in this book. I really like Laura as a protagonist. Also, the women aren't really looked down on in this book. At least not in any blatant ways. Laura is not left out of difficult conversations. She is, her father is very upfront with her. The general tells the story of his niece's death right in front of her. He doesn't try to shield the poor young thing from this terrible tale. No, he's straight up with her. They treat Laura like a person, which I really liked. I really respected. It was great. Like I said, the attraction between Laura and Carmilla is also never demonized in the book. At all. There's a moment where Laura sees a portrait that, they sent their portraits away to be cleaned and they were brought back. And there's a portrait of one of Laura's ancestors who looks exactly like Carmilla. And she's like, hey Dad, can I have this portrait to hang in my room? And her dad's like, you want to hang this picture in your room? And she's like, yeah, it looks like Carmilla. I think it's really pretty, can I hang it in my room? And her dad's like, wow, it must be even prettier than I thought it was if you want to hang it in your room. Dad's not stupid. The reason I was hesitant to use the term love earlier is because throughout the book, we see that Carmilla has a very twisted idea of what love is. She tells Laura a story about her going to this ball and how she was attacked And let me see if I can find it. Let me read it. Carmilla says, There occurred that night what has confused the picture and made its colors faint. I was all but assassinated in my bed, wounded here," she touched her breast, "and never was the same again." Laura asks, "Were you near dying?" "Yes, very. A cruel love, strange love that would have taken my life. Love will have its sacrifices. No sacrifice without blood." Now, I looked up online to see how other people interpreted it, and some people say that this is where Carmilla was actually killed and resurrected as a vampire. It read to me as an assault. That may be totally far off, but it gave me Rosalie Hale vibes. If you read the Twilight books, you know. If you haven't, you don't want to know. But the way that Carmilla describes it, and the way that just the tone of voice that I read it in maybe, was what led me to this conclusion. And then her immediate desire to change the subject afterwards. Yeah, uncomfortable. But it would explain Carmilla's kind of like guarded nature and the way that she doesn't trust certain people and why she only gets close to women. Not saying that lesbianism is caused by trauma. It's not. But it also adds an interesting layer to Carmilla particularly as a character. I haven't found confirmation that that is what happened. And like I said, I may be misinterpreting it, but in my mind, it explains a lot about why Carmilla is so bitter towards certain aspects of life, why she targets men. It just makes sense to me. The reason that I didn't want to say that Carmilla didn't love Laura is because of how much time she spends with her. There is a moment very early in the book where Laura is recounting this nightmare that she had of a woman coming into her chamber and laying down in the bed with her and like holding her and then biting her and feeding off of her, and then leaving. And that woman was Carmilla. She recognizes Carmilla when she sees her. But she's like, wow, what a crazy coincidence, you know? So Carmilla has been hanging around Laura for a very long time. And they're also, turns out, descendants of the same noble lineage on Laura's mother's side. So they come from the same like long history, noble family. So the amount of time that Carmilla spends with Laura and how gentle she is with Laura, she like barely starts getting sick by the end of the book. And so Carmilla is really not wanting to hurt Laura, but she does have this very twisted sense of what love is. She initially says that she has loved nobody and she would love nobody unless it was Laura. And then later, she and Laura are talking about death, and she asks Laura if she's afraid to die, and Laura says, of course, everyone's afraid to die. And Carmilla says, but to die as lovers may, to die together so they may live together. So she's basically coming to Laura and saying, well, if you love me and I love you, then you shouldn't be afraid to die if it means being with me. And that, with Laura's consent, would be really romantic and really beautiful. But she's taking that consent away from Laura. She's not being truthful with her. She's not telling her, it's like, hey, if you want to be with me, you have to die and become a vampire. She's not telling Laura that. If she had, be together, be happy, my little gay babies. Because I think they'd be really cute together, and I think Laura is just what Carmilla needs to kind of help her mellow out. But she's taking that choice away from Laura. So I think Carmilla really does care about Laura in the end, but she's spent so much time just like jaded, and she doesn't trust people, and she just doesn't really know how to love Laura the way that Laura can love Carmilla. So it's tragic, honestly. Carmilla also makes a really, really interesting point towards probably the 3/4 mark, where Carmilla has this charm that she sleeps with, and she pins it to her pillow, and her and Laura are talking about it, and Laura asks what it is. And Carmilla says that it's just like natural, like things that will help, you know, clear my sinuses, make me feel better. It's like, let me read what it is. I can. So she says that the charm has been immersed in drugs that help to fight against malaria. And Laura is like, oh, so it's not supernatural? And Carmilla says, certainly, you don't suppose that evil spirits are frightened by bits of ribbon or the perfumes of a druggist's shop. No, these complaints wandering in the air begin by trying the nerves and so infect the brain, but before they can seize upon you, the antidote repels them. That, I am sure, is what the charm has done for us. It is nothing magical, it is simply natural. And this makes me think of so much about this book and about vampire lore in general. So it's all about nature versus magic, you know? It's Carmilla's way of saying it's not supernatural. It's not scary. What I am is nature. I am a vampire, and in being so, it is my nature to feed. Carmilla's nature is to hunt. Laura's nature is to love Carmilla. And the men's nature is to hunt down and destroy this creature that is causing havoc in their land. It kind of goes back to what I said in my videos about vampires and sexuality and LGBT representation, of how the vampire can't control their nature. And queer people can't control the fact that they're gay. I know a lot of queer people who wish they weren't, because it would just be easier to be, you know, the societal standard. And there are plenty of examples in fiction of vampires not wanting to be vampires because it's so difficult, and they just want to be normal by societal standards. So Carmilla is a great example of LGBTQ people and vampires kind of sharing so many different traits. I really wish that it was longer. I wish that Laura had been more involved in the finale of the book, because she just kind of recounts what the men do, and she doesn't put any input into it. She doesn't try to stop them, which I feel like I don't even think she was there. Was she even there? Were you there? I don't know. But I don't believe she was there for Carmilla's actual dispatching, because if she had been, I think she would have put up a fight. I mean, seeing the woman that you fallen in love with sleeping in literally a pool of blood. Carmilla sleeps in a pool of blood. So metal. I love it. Seeing that would have been difficult for Laura, but I think she would have tried to combat it at least. I just wish there had been more to the ending. But it's a novella, so there's only so much you can do. I really like Carmilla. I love the story. I really liked Laura as a protagonist. Her character arc is very well done. Her voice changes throughout the story to reflect the growth that she's going through as a character. It's just really well done. Carmilla deserved better. She and Laura deserve to be happy, but that's just me. Honestly, I really recommend you go check out Carmilla. It is a classic for a reason. I really liked it. Thank you guys so much for watching and hanging out with me today. Please go check out Carmilla, check out the other videos on my channel. Make sure you like, subscribe, ring the notification bell, all that fun YouTube-y stuff. Go follow me on Instagram, because I'm trying to post a little more frequently on there. It's just really hard because life is stupid and it's difficult and I hate it. Also, happy Pride Month. It's coming to a close, but that doesn't mean that, you know, these stories should be neglected. So go check out Carmilla. If you have any recommendations for LGBT vampire books, please leave them in the description. I'm always looking to expand my reading, so check it out. I love them. Thanks again, and I will see you guys next time. Bye!